Hello, welcome to the second part of the lecture on the Russian School of Etnossociology. The first lecture concentrated on the Russian ethnosociologist Sergei Shirokogorov, and the second part of the lecture will concentrate on the Soviet-era sociologist, ethnosociologist Lev Gumilev. Professor Dugin?
Now we are going to speak about Lev Gumilev, the famous Russian ethnologist and historian. First of all, this year, the year 2012, is the year of 100 year after the birth of this famous historian, and he has great influence on the Russian culture, on Russian science. His books were published in the millions in our country, so he is universally known in Russia, but I think there is very little known in the West, and I think that the lack of knowledge of the Lev Gumilev, it is a problem. It is a loss. It is a loss for European and American ethnology, sociology, and history, because his ideas are very important to know, to be acquainted with, to form the real image or a real picture of Eurasian past, because Gumilev, as a historian, was concentrated on the nomad empires of the ancient Turks, Mongols, and the other tribes and ethnic groups. So he is really extremely important as one of the most important authors that studied the ancient history of Eurasian continent. So, concerning ethno-sociological theories of Gumilev, first of all, we need to point out that his teacher was Shirokogorov, and Gumilev was inspired in his ethnological searches by Shirokogorov, and in some way he continued the work of Shirokogorov, because Gumilev was the son of two pre-revolutionary famous Russian poets, Nikolai Gumilev and Anna Akhmatova. He has received very good education, pre-Soviet education, and possessed a great culture of Russian noblesse, of Russian aristocracy, and he never was really Soviet. He was put in prison for the crimes, so-called crimes committed by his mother, Anna Akhmatova, and but he never was really Soviet. So he followed the studies of different Russian searchers and scientists that were in immigration, and was acquainted with a great number of foreign authors in this scientific field. So Gumilev was really free man in not so free society, and that was tragic destiny of him. So he was influenced by Shirokogorov, but not, but that was not permitted. That was not possible to cite the idea of Shirokogorov openly in his epoch. So he developed the ideas of Shirokogorov, very rarely citing his name or never. The same with Eurasianism, because Gumilev was Eurasianist, one representative of Eurasian movement, but because Eurasianists not were Soviet, were white immigrants living in the West, so the direct citations of them also were prohibited. So being Eurasianists and the continuator of the work of Shirokogorov, Gumilev never had the opportunity to confess it openly, because without that he was persecuted by Soviet Marxist communist government. So it was very tragic, his destiny and his life. In the center of the researches of the Lev Gumilev was ethnos. Ethnos conceived more or less in the same term as Shirokogorov did. So for him, ethnos, for Gumilev, ethnos was the basic kind of human society. So he was inclined to consider all the social process as more or less linked to the ethnos. So he interpreted the society in ethnic terms, developing the approach of Shirokogorov. So on this concept of all-encompassing ethnos, he has constructed his theory of ethnogenesis. Ethnogenesis was the central theory of Lev Gumilev. Here is very important to define how Gumilev understood ethnos. For him, ethnos represented the simplest kind of society, as well as more sophisticated and complex kind of society. In our course of Etnossociology, we have different name for the same social and historical state of the society. So, in order to understand better the place of Gumilev in the Etnossociology, we should define differences in the terms. So, for Gumilev, ethnos was cyclical phenomenon. So, ethnos is dynamic also, and starting from homeostasis, the Greek word for define something always equal to itself in the kind of the repetition of the same, that fully coincides with our conception of ethnos in the Etnossociology and Shirokogorov's concept. But Gumilev thought that also there is ethnic phenomenon when these kind of stability is overturned by some special moment that Gumilev called passionarity. The passionarity, or in Russian passionarность, that was the word introduced by Gumilev to give a name to special phenomenon of the end of the stability of social stability of ethnic existence, and as a reason of growth of the complexity of the society. So the point of the passionarity was considered by him as the growth of the particular types of human. They were for him, named by him as passionaries, passionarii. And this type of human being were more than ethnic. So they weren't satisfied with the repetition of the same, of the homeostatic state of the ethnic society, and they began all kinds of exploits, risky, dangerous exploits, in order to make something new. That was the end of the ethnos for us in the etnosociology, and that was beginning of the people, or laos in the Greek, as I have explained in the introductory lecture. So, but Gumilev, Lev Gumilev, didn't make the same terminological difference between complex society that we are calling people and ethnic stable society that we are calling ethnos, and he spoke about different stages and phases of ethnogenesis. So first stage of ethnogenesis, according to him, was homeostasis, that corresponds totally, fully with our idea of ethnos as such. And after that, after the splash, after the flash of the passionarity, that was the growth of complicity, growth of complicity of the social structure, and creation of historical units, states, empires, and social stratificated kind of society with greater complexity. So Gumilev considered that after flash of the passionarity, the complexity begins to grow, and also it is the stage of the growth of the culture, of the state, of the territory, of the civilization, up to the certain point when this passionarity and the quantity of the passionarii is arrived to the highest point that was called by Gumilev by ekmetic phase, from the Greek word akme, that is the highest point of something. So ekmetic phase of the growth of the ethnos is a kind of full expansion of its potentiality. And after that begins the decline of ethno structure. The number of passionaries also declined, there came in this, on the scene sub-passionaries, sub-passionari, according to him, that lack the certain type of person that lack a real activity, a real force and real possibility to create something new, but they use who use the passionaries in order to take from them their force, and by that usurpation to gain the control over the masses. So the kind of parasites living on the account of the passionaries. So sub-passionari begin to grow, and the number in this stage of decline, they pervert the social and cultural system. They cause the confusion of the values, and after the catastrophe of ethnos in the last stage, it falls anew in a kind of homeostasis. So a kind of ethnic stage. Gumilev made a picture of different civilization explained by this ethnogenetic cycle, and according to him, this cycle lasts more or less for 1,000 years for each civilization, if all the ethnogenetic processes are fully manifested, fully developed. In the other cases, this development could be stopped by extrinsic factors, by something that proceeds from outer sources. So it is more or less what is interesting, that comparing Gumilev's theory of ethnogenesis with ethnosociological taxonomy of ethnos and people as laos in Greek, we could say that Gumilev considered homeostasis exactly as we are describing the ethnos or ethnic group, as something where all efforts is given to the main goal to conserve the same and to struggle against new. Gumilev proposed a kind of equation. Passionarity is equal to instinct. That is a formula for the ethnos or homeostasis for him. So passionarity is equal to grant the survival of the same. It is that give the level of passionarity is exactly the same as needed to reproduce the same. For Gumilev, it was the formula of homeostasis. In the phase of passionarity, the growth of passionarity, there in the society, ethnic system for Gumilev, the passionarity is more their instinct. So in the same human types, and same human type is concentrated more force that are needed to grant the same, to reproduce. And that is a point where is produced something something new, something accumulated something extra. So extra product. And in all senses, in cultural sense, in economic sense, in material sense, and a spiritual sense. So it is a kind of development of the religions, of the society and state structure. In the etnosociological taxonomy, to this stage corresponds the stage of people or laos or traditional society, where we are dealing with more complexity, much more complexity than in the case of ethnic society. And that is a growth of the people going to its acmatic stage. After arriving to this point, begins decline when there are other formula that prevails. The formula that affirms that passionality is lesser than required for conservation of the same. So there are subpassionaries, subpassionaries that enter the scene and begin to destroy the society created by passionaries. So it is the third formula. And after destructive work of this type with particularly for vampiric, we could say, nature, they will be anew the society, ethnic society, or a kind of homeostatic society. And that after some period, new passionaries, according to Gumilev, from different ethnic group, create new people, a new historic entity, and all that begins anew. So this kind of interpreting the history as cycles of ethnogenesis is the sense of the theory of Nikolai Gumilev, and he applied this concept to Russian history, to history of Eurasian people, but also to the European and to ancient, to modern, and for Gumilev, there were different ethnic systems in the Russian history, but in the present time, Russia lives just after acmatic stage and the beginning of the decline. But this decline should last for him normally, if it will develop normally. This decline will last for more or less 600 years. So it is all about Gumilev, but also the last thing that we could say about him, that he proposed also the original taxonomy based on the type of ethnic systems. For example, he considered the simplest form of social organization as consortium. After that, gas convixia, after that sub-ethnos, ethnos, and super-ethnos. So for him, all these groups were linked to the ethnos, and it's dynamic and should be considered in the construction of any ethnic system. Sub-ethnos, it is a part of ethnic group or tribe. Ethnos is a main category. Super-ethnos, for example, Gumilev considered to be Soviet people as super-ethnos, or Roman people of Roman Empire, super-ethnos. And the consortium or convixia were a lesser form of human association that in some situation could produce, according to him, ethnos as such. For Gumilev, Gumilev pondered on the reason of existence of the phenomena of passionality, because it was regarded by him as something totally different from the ethnic conditions of living. So it is something transcendental, as a kind of inexplainable intrusion on something else, on something alien in the ethnic community. And in short of reasonable and materialist required by the epoch explanations, Gumilev made appeal to the theory of Chizhevsky, Russian scientist, that tried to explain some social and historical events by different eclipses and flashes on the sun. So it was materialistic way to express a kind of bewilderness, a kind of profound astonishment in front of some historical phenomenon. So nothing could be regarded as sufficient reason for apparition of the passionality, and that it seems that it comes from outside, but outside for materialists was the sky or the stars or sun or moon or the moon. But I think that is more the weakest point of Gumilev's theory concerning the links that exist between this flash of passionality in the society, in the flash in the sun, or drastic changes in the ambience, natural ambience linked to these meteorological events. But nevertheless, I think that the fact that he attract our attention to the phenomenon of passionality and invite us to explore more in this sense, it is worth of appraisal. So now I'm finishing a short observation on the source of the sources of Russian ethno-sociological, most important Russian ethno-sociological writers, and here introductory part of a course on ethno sociology is finished, I will evoke more authors and theories in the course of second part of this course, when I will speak about different kind of ethno-sociological understanding of the types of societies, transformations, and other social changes.
Okay, the first question that I have, you partially answered right at the end of your discussion, but I thought I'd revisit it simply because it is one of the burning concerns of Westerners, sociologists, particularly when they look at Lev Gumilev. They regard his work in history and much of his work in sociology as genius. I think rightly so. But at the same time, he, I think, is somewhat misunderstood in the context of his times. And I think there is a distinction made between that work, which is considered genius, and some of his more, shall we say, controversial ideas that veer off into what in the West would probably be called pseudoscience, such as the linking of passionarity with solar energy and solar cycles, the linking of ethnicity with biology and race, and so on. So do you think that these ideas were merely developed to support his ideas in what you call a materialist Soviet academic context, or do you draw some other distinction between these two sides of his work?
Thank you for your question. First of all, I think that we should understand the ambience of Soviet Union, and there were real pressure on the scientists by the official ideology. So we could not dismiss easily this factor. So he was obliged not to mention some names. It was obvious. He obviously was Eurasianist, but he could confess that only at the end of his life. So he was obliged to use some language of materialist ambience, and that is one point. Another point is that some kind of his interpretation of the ethnos and ethno-sociological processes could be challenged. I don't think he should be accepted as something dogmatic. I think that he could find its very important place in the context of ethno-sociology, but at the same time we should not regard him as the last word in the discussion. So maybe he believed in the sun flashes, as academician Chezhevsky, also that was Russian academician, so kind of materialist mythology. So, but maybe not. Maybe he had the other ideas. It is impossible now to know. At the same time, I think that one point we should insist on is that he never was a racist. Never. He never used the word race, and he never suggested that there are some ethnic group that should be considered as superior to the other. He only affirmed always that the ethnical groups are different, but that is the very concept of ethnos, because to be different from one another, they group, we group, as Sumner has put it. So it is necessary aspect of definition of ethnos. So I think that it is misunderstanding with Gumilev in the West, and now there are articles in the Western press completely erroneous because he wasn't such a person, the image of which we could find in the modern European press. Very kind of caricature, and without knowing his work. For example, in Italy, only one little book is translated. In French, it seems that no one at all. So, but he is author of many, more than 30 books of very different quality and very dedicated to the different subjects. So, I suggest to study Gumilev first, and after that judge it.
Good.
Время.
Да,
Пять.
уже 5 часов.
Да.
Ну, и
Ну, одно
в
можно,
принципе,
еще одно. Вопрос и все.
Ну, я не приготовила.
Мартин.
Okay. All right. I'll just bring us a little bit further back on the same line of questioning then. So if we are to take the concept of passionarity and describe it or understand it today in the context of all Gumilev's work and in the modern day as a somewhat ununderstandable force of societal, speaking in the ethnic sense, of will and creativity that propels an ethnicity forward to greatness. And we describe this as a contradictory to ethnicity as an inherently conservative force. But I then bring up the question of perhaps the great Russian, what we would call in these terms, passionarists. If we take a look at Tolstoy, if we take a look at Dostoevsky, these are some of the ideas that we could certainly consider the great people of Russia. But most of these great people of the Russian ethnos or super ethnos have been considered conservative forces in their own society, both at the time and in history. So is that a little bit of a contradiction?
Not at all, I think, but ethnic conservatism is something completely different from cultural conservatism, because with conservatism we are dealing with, in the case of Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, we are dealing with some highly sophisticated concept of complex society in a very with high level of complexity. So it is a kind of artificial conservatism, and ethnic conservatism is different. But at the same time, we could, and Gumilev also evoked that aspect, that in he called that in the case of sane passionarity, there is a great deal of conservatism, because this kind of passionarity insists on the greatness of the whole. In this insistence, it is conservation and expansion of the whole that plays part, and that is morbid passionarity, that is destructive, and that is kind of illness. But worst of all is sub-passionarity, and the proliferation of the sub-passionaries in the Russian society was dramatical reason of our catastrophic social processes. So I think that the passionaries, conservative or progressive, could be positive for the case of the whole society. And the sub-passionaries, they always are morbid, and they bear with them the destruction and decadence. I think, honestly, that European society or American society is not so much today ruled by passionaries, but mostly by sub-passionaries. Maybe United States is a little bit different because there is a great deal of passionaries there, but they are, as long as I know, misorientated passionaries, only in the realm of economic power and egoism, but they are half-rolled to the sub-passionaries, that it may be degrading passionaries. But I think that the greatness for passionaries, as Gumilev explained, that is a main reason of life, the greatness. For the ethnic group is the conservation of the same. Now, two different goals, two different orientations, and this passion for the greatness, I consider it very important for any kind of the sane society.